All right, what's going on? It's Michael, co-founder, reality hacker. Excited to be with you today. Going to be going through chapter 17 of The Power of Awareness by Neville Goddard. If you have not gone through this book 55 times, that's okay. Hopefully, by paying attention and joining us here, you get the opportunity to do just that. I'm really excited. As always, if you're new here, go ahead and like, subscribe. Come on, we want to see you. We want to hang out with you more. If you like what you hear here, I'll tell you what, you don't have to subscribe until the end. How about we make that deal, okay? You like what you see, you like what you hear, go ahead and click that like and subscribe button. So I'm excited to dive in today. Today we're getting into chapter 17 of The Power of Awareness by Neville. All things are possible, right? This is one of my favorite chapters. I feel like this is the theme of my own life. I've been able to do a lot of things and I've been through a lot of things. And for those of you that know my story, you know where I've been. And I really consider, and take so much of this so literally because of my own experiences, right? Because I believe 110% in the literal interpretations in a lot of what is said here. I also believe that there are layers and layers and layers of revelation that wait for us as we grow on our own path. I think that one thing we discount much too often is the fact that, you're not really going to be learning new things, repeatedly. More so, it's about learning the same things from different points of view, different perspectives, giving new concepts, the same overview with different revelations. So chapter 17, all things are possible, right? It is great significance that the truth of the principles outlined in this book have been proven time and time again by the personal experiences of the author, and I think it's a great start to a chapter. It says, hey, you know what? I've done it. I'm telling you this because I've done it. And I can also personally tell you that I've done what he says and it works. It works. It works. Throughout the past 25 years, he, the author, has applied these principles and proved them successful in innumerable instances. He attributes to an unwavering assumption of his wish already being fulfilled every success that he has achieved. He was confident that, by these fixed assumptions, his desires were predestined to be fulfilled. I love that. Time and time again, he assumed the feeling of his wish fulfilled and continued in his assumption until that which he desired was completely realized. Live your life in a sublime spirit of confidence and determination. Disregard appearances, conditions, in fact, all evidence of your senses that deny the fulfillment of your desire. Rest in the assumption that you already are what you want to be, for in that determined assumption, you and your infinite being are merged in creative unity, and with your infinite being, God, all things are possible. God never fails. Through the mastery of your assumptions, you are in very truth enabled to master life. It is thus that the ladder of life is ascended, thus the ideal is realized. The clue to the real purpose of life is to surrender yourself to your ideal with such awareness of its reality that you begin to live the life of the ideal and no longer your own life as it was prior to this surrender. Each assumption has its corresponding world. If you are truly observant, you will notice the power of your assumptions to change circumstances which appear wholly immutable. You, by your conscious assumptions, determine the nature of the world in which you live. Ignore the present state and assume the wish fulfilled. Claim it, it will respond. The law of assumption is the means by which the fulfillment of your desires may be realized. Every moment of your life, consciously or unconsciously, you are assuming a feeling. You can no more avoid assuming a feeling than you can avoid eating and drinking. All you can do is control the nature of your assumptions. Thus, it is clearly seen that the control of your assumption is the key you now hold to an ever-expanding, happier, more noble life. This chapter isn't as educating as much as it is declaratory, right? The first part of this chapter is Neville talking about his own success with the methods, and I think it brings a lot of credibility. But here on, it talks about really, I think that if we were to interview Neville, there might be some things that he would say that may not be written in any of his works. But I do believe 110% that he would bring it back to this. He would bring it back to time and time again, he assumed the feeling of his wish fulfilled and continued in his assumption until that which he desired was completely realized. He attributes to an unwavering assumption of his wish already being fulfilled every success that he has achieved. I also talks about that he talks about, he was confident that by these fixed assumptions, his desires were predestined to be fulfilled. And I think that when you are really, and I want you to think about this for yourself. Do you genuinely believe that your desires are predestined to be fulfilled? I was actually having a conversation with my fiance this morning about this, and I 110% believe that there is predestination in desire. I don't believe desire would exist without it being meant to be ultimately fulfilled, right? I 110%. But here's the thing, right? To get to that place, you have to understand that you're not the human, right? You are imagination, as Neville says over and over and over and over again. And if you are imagination, then there's nothing that comes to you that's irrelevant in any way, shape, or form, right? And I think this applies especially to desire, right? He was confident that by these fixed assumptions, his desires were predestined to be fulfilled, and I think there's an attitude that he carried there. I think there's an attitude that anybody carries that totally adheres to this, that really says, yes, 110%, my assumptions turn into reality. I think the thing about Neville too was that he was absolutely persistent, right? He definitely lived by the fruit of his own teachings. He did not falter. He continued up until, right, when he passed away, to really adhere to a lot of these concepts. I think towards the end of his life, he got a little more loosey-goosey. He got a little more ethereal in nature, and talking more about man being all imagination or humans being all imagination. But he lived his life by these principles. And I think that, again, going back to the core concept here, really evaluating your own attitude with desire, right? Can you honestly look inside of your heart and say that you believe that your desires are predestined to be fulfilled, right? Do you believe in that predestination? And I think that, again, a lot of that attitude, and I mean, I'll be honest with you, I think that conviction right there, if you're truly living with this concept that everything you desire is kind of predestined to be fulfilled, I think that you're on a path of inevitability in regards to your manifestation. There's so many times we overestimate where we need to be just to actually take the action or walk into the space where we're realizing our desire. The body follows consciousness. It always follows consciousness. So what if we just gave ourselves permission to lean into that sense of predestination about ourselves? What if we really lived with the conviction that all of your desires were meant to be fulfilled? How would it be different than where you are today? How would you be living? How would you be thinking? How would you be breathing? How would you be doing? How would you be moving? Right? This is one thing that we don't consider when it comes to manifesting. What do we look like, right? What do we look like as we are living from that ideal space? What does our health look like? What does our relationships look like? Live your life in a sublime spirit of confidence and determination. Disregard appearances, conditions, in fact, all evidence of your senses that deny the fulfillment of your desire. Now, here's the thing. I 100% agree with that statement, that you should deny or disregard any evidence that denies the fulfillment of your desire. But I think it's a very fine line between total denial and denial that leads to inspired action. I think that there is a balance here between really making sure that you're not ignoring yourself, that in your obsession with whatever it is, that you're not ignoring things that you could do right now to actually move into that space. And I'm willing to wager that if you actually were living as though you were what you would want to be, you wouldn't be in denial of any sort of negative patterns or any sort of negative, psychological movement in your body that continually leads to negative outcomes in perpetuity, right? This is something that's really important that we don't talk about a lot, because it's not about denial as much as it's about untriggerability, right? I can look at something, and ultimately, if it's something that I don't like that's going on in my life and I'm triggered by it, I'm definitely not in a place where I'm living from that space of the wish fulfilled. I'm not. Being triggered by it is indicative of my state around whatever that subject is. So this isn't about denial as much as it is being willing to look at the things that don't reflect the fulfillment of desire and not be emotionally charged by them. That's a big one. That's a big one, because the truth, and here's the inadvertent fact of that, is that if you're actually living in that state of fulfilled desire, you won't be triggered by those things, right? So this is why it's really all about fully immersing yourself presently. Notice how Neville says, he always includes the present with immersing yourself in the feeling of the wish fulfilled. He never advocates for being in your mind away from the now, because the now is where all things are birthed, right? This is where all miracles, all inspired action that leads to positive outcomes, it's all birthed here and now. Healthy solutions, healthy situations, abundant solutions, abundant situations. They're birthed from presence. They're not birthed from me being consumed with the past or the future. And this is one thing in this community that's a little hard for a lot of us, is not being obsessed with the future, because we're so desperate to get what we want that we actually lose out on living the life that we have. That, for all intents and purposes, is really, really wonderful. And I think that's one of the key tenets of spirituality, that we get lost in trying to, create so much that we forget to be present here. That's really the goal here. Because when you're full of presence, when you're full of here and now, there's so much satisfaction, there's so much fulfillment, there's so many of the tonalities of the things that you actually want in the space of presence, right? Whenever something that you really want, you're looking at the tonalities. You're looking at a couple different tonalities. You're looking at, you want it because you think you'll be fulfilled, because you think it'll make you happy, satisfied, right? There's a ton of different reasons or feelings that come up when we're excited about desire. But at the end of the day, all of those feelings are contained inside of presence. And this is why I love presence, because it's a big hack. It's a big hack for creating your life, because as long as I'm obsessed with the future, I can't create from the present. And if I can't create from the present, I'm mostly going to create from the past, which is a very interesting paradox. But the truth is, our need to be obsessed with the future is usually about our need to control, which stems from a lot of our past experiences. It's very, very, very interchangeable. It's very, very intermixed. There's a lot of complexities here. So we want to try and keep it simple, right? We want to try and keep it simple. Rest in the assumption that you already are what you want to be, for in that determined assumption, you and your infinite being are merged in creative unity. And with your infinite being, all things are possible. God never fails. Rest in the assumption that you already are what you want to be, for in that determined assumption, you and your infinite being are merged in creative unity. I love this, right? He really just says resting. So resting, okay, let's get a little technical with this for a second, despite our need for simplicity, okay? Let's talk about resting in the assumption. When we're talking about resting in an assumption, we're not talking about laying down with anxiety in my chest, or I'm not talking about laying down and being over emotionally excited about something. This is not resting in assumption. The type of rest that we're looking for is the rest that exists in the subconscious, which is most likely going to be in theta. See, here's the thing, man. Being overly emotionally excited about our desire can be just as detrimental as being overly negative about it. There's a very, very, very fine line of rest that comes with the subconscious. I think that when something is, when you're resting in an assumption, you're natural about it. And when you're natural about something, you're not overly excited and, oh my gosh, look, blah, 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 blah. And you're not overly negative about it. It's like, it's more of a, yeah, this is true. Right? Yeah, this is true. I love what William Blake said. I think William Blake said it, could be wrong. Neville mentions it. What seems to be is for the person that says it seems to be. Essentially, right, the way it is the way it is for the person that says that's the way it is. Whatever way it is for you when you are at rest, when you're not active and hyper involved in everything, that's the reality that you are creating. You're not creating the reality when you're hyped up in the morning listening to Kesha while you're getting ready for work or to look at emails for your company. You are creating from that space of rest when there's no stimulation, when it's just you by yourself in your room alone. That is the space you are creating from. And if you can look at that with honesty, not judgment, honesty, you can really determine why, what, where, who, all the logistics of the reality that you're creating from, right? Because it's not about the excited moments. Those don't determine what we manifest. It is the consistent attitude, the dominant attitude that we keep during the day, in not only in response to life, but again, in those moments when we are completely silent, when we're completely at rest. Rest in the assumption that you already are what you want to be, for in that determined assumption, you and your infinite being are merged in creative unity. I love that too, because when you're natural about something, you are determined, because it's not about this need to pass or fail, or success or unsuccess, whatever. It's when you are in that state of naturalness, I think there's a natural determination that comes from that essentially discusses inevitability, right? Well, it's like this desire is happening whether the entire world comes crashing down or not, right? It's just an inevitability. And it's that sense of determined assumption, determined attitude, that we're truly led to bridges of incidents that lead us into the valley of fulfilled desire. Through the mastery of your assumptions, you are in very truth enabled to master life. Why? Because from our basic assumptions, basic fundamental rationalizations about ourselves in relation to the world, everything in our lives unfolds. We see, view, experience everything from that place. And so if we can come back to that place and look at living from that place, at really making this understanding of assumption being the operant nature of the tool, right, of the interface that we are for consciousness, we can really begin to do things well. And if you're confused, if you are not knowing what to do, we still want to do the same exact thing. Because again, action comes from being. Action always comes from being. And very rarely does action that is taken from lack result in wholeness, if ever. And even if it does result in wholeness, that wholeness eventually reveals itself to be lack. Because oranges grow from orange trees, apples grow from apple trees. Abundant actions and abundant outcomes come from abundant consciousness. Consciousness that is always focused on lack and how much there is not, and how much more weight there is, and how much frustration there is, and how much everything isn't perfect. It only breeds more of itself into your life. It is thus that the ladder of life is ascended, thus the ideal is realized. The clue to the real purpose of life is to surrender yourself to your ideal with such awareness of its reality that you begin to live the life of the ideal and no longer your own life as it was prior to this surrender. And what you will notice here is if you're actually living that ideal, you're probably beginning to think about doing things that feel really good, that are really good for you. You're probably looking at spending a lot of your time in ways that actually fulfill you, and not just spending years of your life doing things that don't necessarily matter. When you really begin to step into that assumption, the life of that ideal, you begin to take on the tonalities of that in your experience, and slowly but surely, through persistence and bridges of incidents, the pieces come together, and they come together, and eventually desire is realized. The law does not change. The law will not change. This law will never change. What you embody, you become. And that's a fact, Jack. Each assumption has its corresponding world. And notice how he doesn't say street. He doesn't say neighborhood. He doesn't say city. He doesn't say country. He doesn't say continent. He says world. Each assumption has its corresponding world. Why? Because from our basic assumptions, our entire views of everything are completely shifted. We cannot change our assumptions and not change the way we look at the world. If we change the assumptions that we have, our views of the world will change. And that's why Neville says over and over and over, don't go to the mirror and look at yourself and say vain affirmations that you know you don't believe. Go to your closet. Go to your closet. Don't try and change the world. Go to your closet, change your assumptions, and because of your changed assumptions, you will change the way you look at the world, and in turn, the world you look at will be changed. It's not that the world changed, it's that you changed. And this is the most amazing part about all of this, is because something you used to look at in one way will most likely be looked at completely different. Because when you go through this process, you're literally reassigning meaning in your nervous system. You are reassigning what means what on the most basic levels, and this can't be changed. If you're truly observant, you'll notice the power of your assumptions to change circumstances which appear wholly immutable. And I'll tell you what, man, that has been the story of my life. There are so many circumstances that have come to pass in such a way that ultimately I shouldn't have made it out, whether it's sexual abuse, whether it's foster systems, whether it's parents continuing to leave me. There's so many different things that have came into my life and really seemed to be something that were inevitable for me to succumb to. But that is one of my greatest gratitudes for understanding this, is that ultimately, no matter the turmoil, no matter the pain, there is a greater awareness. There's a tool for ascension, and our circumstances are not our circumstances are not our end, right? That is really, 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 really important, because what is in you is greater than what is in the world, right? Going back to ancient Proverbs, this is super, super, super important. You, by your conscious assumptions and unconscious, determine the nature of the world in which you live. Ignore the present state, assume the wish fulfilled, claim it, it will respond. The law of assumption is the means by which the fulfillment of your desires might be realized. Every moment of your life, consciously or unconsciously, you're assuming a feeling. You can no more avoid assuming a feeling than you can avoid eating and drinking, okay? The law of assumption is the means by which the fulfillment of your desire might be realized. The key to getting there is realizing that you are already there, because you are all imagination, which is perfect and full in nature. And truthfully, when you take all of the matter and wealth in the universe and you put it in one pile, it does not even pale in comparison to the worth and abundance and infinity that you are. And it is so important that you dwell on this and continue to come back to this, that you're not an individual being having a more expansive experience. You are a spiritual, infinite being having actually somewhat of a constricted experience. And that's okay, because beyond the ideology of constriction, you are infinite. You can no more avoid leveraging this law than you can avoid eating and drinking. This is what's really important to understand too. Like, this is not something that we come into contact with when we're ready to actually take responsibility for ourselves. This power, this law has been in place for all of us, for all of our history, because of the nature of consciousness itself. Ever since the first human, this law has been in operation. It continues to be in operation to this day, and ultimately it will be in operation for the duration of the third and fourth dimension in time and space. So if you're waiting for that to end, you've got a long, 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 long way. So understand that the law is the law. And guess what? Can't help but conform to it. Can't help but leveraging it, because you are infinite consciousness experiencing itself as a human. All you can do, all you can control, is the nature of your assumptions. Thus, it's clearly seen that the control of your assumption is the key you now hold to an ever-expanding, happier, and more noble life. As long as you are convinced that you are not, you will not be. And the more you allow yourself to sit into that place of possibility, not even full identification with whatever it is that you want, but the longer you allow yourself to sit in the space of possibility and expansion, also sometimes called the wish fulfilled, the more that space becomes normal to your nervous system. See, here's the thing. The whole thing about being natural about something is that it's integrated into your nervous system. And as a result, your nervous system sends signals to your body that get you to and interact with your body in such a way that you actually begin to reflect that sort of lifestyle. Until this idea, this concept of yourself has a natural place in your subconscious, it won't ever come into your life. And that's okay. This shouldn't be scary. It should be challenging. It should be exciting, enticing, right? This is an opportunity for you to fully step into your power, right? The power that you are, I should say. This is an opportunity for you, right? If you are not feeling a certain way, give yourself opportunity to feel a different way. And how do you do that, man? There's a couple different ways. Obviously, there are great things out there, but check out the Limitless Day Method. The Limitless Day Method was designed for ultimately illumination and self-optimization, right? How do you actually acknowledge the stories that you're telling yourself that aren't necessarily healthy for you without judging them? And then how do you let them go? And then how do you install new beliefs, new stories, new self-concepts, new assumptions, right? That's why we designed the Limitless Day Method. So check that out when you can. You'll find that in the bio. Make sure to like and subscribe as well. I'm really excited, super grateful for you joining me here. It's been fun. Can you believe that these chapters are only 2 pages, but we sit here and we talk for 25 minutes. It's awesome. Thank you for listening. I've had a great time with you today. If you have any questions, go ahead, comments, feedback, anything, go ahead and share. I want to hear from you. I want to engage with you. That's why we're here. We're here to support and make sure that you are getting everything that you need. So that being said, I had a great time today, and I will talk to you soon.